This week brings action fans Doom, The Dark Ages, the newest first-person shooter in a series that dates all the way back to 1993. In that time, we've seen good, bad, and absolutely wild magazine covers featuring the long-running franchise in publications like Electronic Gaming Monthly, Hyper, and Game Informer. These are just a few of the magazines that we're going to be talking about today when we look at the best and worst magazine covers. Doom Edition. Now, when I think Doom, this diehard game fan cover from 1994 is the very first thing that pops into my head. Sure, it's promoting the 32X version, but it's also one of the few times when the monitor's head is being used as a television screen. On one hand, I really like that the artist had to recreate an iconic moment from the video game. I'm pretty sure that this is also the closest that we've ever been to the monitor's blue body, giving us a detailed view of his weirdly veiny neck and all the wiring that goes into his head. I'm not gonna lie, the more I look at his neck, the more grossed out I am about the monitor. And I gotta say that it's borderline irresponsible to suggest that the 32X can play Doom without a cartridge or a Genesis. On the other hand, it's certainly memorable, and I've seen some of the really bad magazine covers that are coming up, so I gotta give it a 4 out of 5. One thing that I always liked about Doom's original box art is that despite having big muscles and dual-wielding a pair of guns, the Doom guy always looks like he's just seconds away from being overwhelmed by a horde of hellish demons. You don't get that sensation when looking at this Electronic Gaming Monthly cover. With a smoking gun and a glance back at the viewer, it's clear that the Doom guy has already laid waste to his foes. The action is in the past tense, which really robs this cover of its urgency and excitement. Now, EGM does try to make up for this by adding a very small demon in the lower right-hand side of the issue, but I mean, it's so disconnected from the action that it might as well be on a different magazine cover. I don't like this. 2 out of 5. The first thing you're going to notice about this GamePro cover is just how cluttered it is. As your eyes dart from Super Mario 64 to Ridge Racer to Tekken 2, you may not even notice that there's a Doom 64 boss hiding right behind all that clutter. Look, I suppose this may have been impressive back in 1996, when computer graphics were still relatively new. But these days, I just can't help but judge how outdated it looks. It really does make a strong case for traditional hand-drawn artwork, something that never really goes out of style. This is GamePro basically putting a big fat naked guy on the cover, and nobody wants that. Thankfully, the clutter covers up his bits and bobs. But let me tell you, that's not going to be enough to save this design from getting a 1 out of 5. Now this is more like it. Well, I'm sure that Doom purists will take issue with the redesigned protagonist and the lack of the iconic spacesuit. You have to admit that this computer gaming world cover sure is exciting. I really like the scale between the hero and the horned demon that he's fighting. And that background, it only hints at the nastiness waiting after you get done with this guy. It perfectly captures the spirit of those first couple Doom games. I really like how they didn't just reuse the artwork from the box. This is a great cover, 5 out of 5. Although I set out to only include one cover from each publication, I wanted to make an exception for 2 different magazines, Hyper and Total. Both of these magazines fall into the same trap of having one great cover, followed soon after by a terrible cover. In the case of Hyper, I'd say that this one is easily the better of the 2. This is one of the few magazine covers that shows the action from the first-person perspective, just like it is in the game. And having those fangs and claws lunging at you is enough to scare just about anybody, even if you're holding a chainsaw. The more I study the artwork, the less I like it, but I can't ignore how eye-catching it is. There's a real urgency to this cover that you don't get from a lot of the other magazines. And for that reason alone, I'm gonna go with a 4 out of 5. Ooh, what a difference a couple of years makes. Everything that I liked about the previous cover is completely absent here. Much like GamePro's terrible design, this is yet another magazine where our hero has been completely removed. There's not even a hint of a chainsaw. From his horse phase to the way the horns are pointed, there's so much about this enemy design that annoys me. And all that's before I even notice the wiring happening around his legs and groin. And why is he firing off to the side when he's looking straight forward? Who does that? I gotta say, it was also presumptuous of them to assume that Doom 64 would be the final Doom. Yeah, not even close. 2 out of 5, and not just because of that terrible prediction. The other magazine that doubled up on Doom is Total, which slapped the game on the cover of both issues 44 and 46. Of the two, this earlier issue is definitely the weaker design. Instead of showing the action from a first-person perspective, the cover goes in the complete opposite direction, showing the action from the enemy's point of view. As a result, we have a big effing gun pointed right in our direction, ready to take us out in a single shot. But if that wasn't scary enough, just look at the Doom guy's face. I don't think it's just me, but he looks scared, terrified even. It's not going to take much more than a small gust of wind or maybe a cat running by for him to unleash hell on whatever's in front of him. So I'm just going to stand over here on his side, giving this cover a very middle-of-the-road 3 out of 5. Look, I'm not here to defend the second Total issue as one of the greatest cover designs of all time, but at least the Doom guy doesn't look petrified. Here he's posing with what looks like a very strung-out version of Black Orchid from Killer Instinct. Don't get me wrong, I'm not here to judge, but that girl is in desperate need of a good night's sleep. Doom guy, on the other hand, doesn't even look remotely tired, but rather jacked up on adrenaline and steroids. I don't know if I trust the look in his eyes. I'm telling you, this is not what healthy looks like. And yet, I can't look away. These two just look like they've been through something, which makes me want to root for them. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. If we fast forward a couple of decades, we're going to find a lot of magazines celebrating the return of Doom in 2016. While this Edge cover is unquestionably better looking than the drug-ridden design that we just looked at, it's also somehow just a lot more boring. Sure, it looks fantastic. They've given the Doom guy a complete redesign, and it's definitely shiny. Personally, I could take it or leave it. There's no question that it would have caught my eye on the newsstand. But there just isn't much to it when you get past the character's glow-up. For some, that might be more than enough to rate it higher, but I'm gonna go with the 3 out of 5. Now this is more like it. This is another great cover that uses the game's first-person perspective to show us something super cool. And while it's a world apart from the artwork found in the original game's box art, it still captures the same hopeless feeling. I mean, you may have a massive gun, but what good is that gonna do if you're going up against a giant with an even bigger arm cannon? And even if you do manage to kill the hellish beast, there's still like 5 more ferocious enemies just waiting to pounce on our hero, and that's just on the cover. If you look at the back of the issue, you'll find that it's even more dire for the Doom guy. If I'm gonna nitpick, I'd say that this could probably use a little bit more color, but this is a great cover. 5 out of 5. Now before we finalize the scores, I first want to check in with this official Xbox magazine cover, which may actually be the worst design that we've seen yet. I'll freely admit that it may just be me, but I'm not a huge fan of these covers that highlight the Doom villain without showing our hero in some capacity. It doesn't help that the ugly woodsman is hard to look at, and not just because of the outdated computer graphics. The cover is dark and uneventful. You can even tell that all this is before anything exciting happened, because the chainsaw is spotless, not even a drop of blood on it. Look, even as a big Doom fan, this bland cover would not make me want to drop everything and buy Doom 3. 1 out of 5. The final magazine cover that I want to look at comes from an outlet that you might not expect, Wired. This is the one and only Doom cover that isn't promoting game coverage, but rather is highlighting how the military is both recruiting and training soldiers through games. You gotta remember, this is all the way back in 1997, before the armed forces really took the mask off and started doing all of this just out in the open. That makes for a rather prescient article, as well as one of my absolute favorite magazine covers. There's a simplicity to this design that I really like. They used the head of the Doom guy and just fit him into real-life military headgear. It works, giving us a visual that perfectly matches the tone of the article. Honestly, it's the kind of cover that I would expect from Wired, and it's an approach that none of the other magazines would have even considered. This is a personal favorite, 5 out of 5. Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic magazine covers. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we rank these types of magazine covers every month. And when there's a big franchise that has a new installment, maybe we'll go back and actually look at their best and worst magazine covers. You know, just like we did here with Doom. Now, here's the question I have for you. What are the best and worst Doom magazine covers? Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back with reviews of both Neon Apex Beyond the Limit and Super Engine GT Turbo Spec. Yeah, lots of racing. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.